In this video, we'll expand on what we've already learned about the select statement. What I want to cover is the order by clause, which is basically a way to sort our data, either ascending or descending. We'll then cover adding expressions or mathematical formulas, equations in our select and where clause. We'll talk about how to alias our columns, and then the distinct keyword and what that does. So first, let's talk about the order by clause, since it's so easy to use. It is always, always, always the last clause in a select statement. So what I have here is select title, cost, retail, category from books, and I'm going to order by the title. So I can select that, hit go, and now the titles are in alphabetical order. There are a couple other keywords I can add to this, and one is ASC for ascending, so that would be A to B to C to D. Of course, that's what it does by default, so you don't have to put it in ASC because it would do that anyway. But if you want to do it the other way, so starting at Z, I can type the word descending, or the letters descending. DESC, I guess I should say. So now when I run that, it starts, in this case, the walk, shortest, revenge. It's going in the opposite direction. And if you remember from a previous video, that's also what we can use to describe tables. I can put DESC in a table name, and it will describe a table. Okay, so you can also sort by more than one column. So again, title, cost, retail, category from books. I'm going to order first by category, and I'm doing it descending, and then within the category I will sort the title ascending. Again, that's optional since that's the default way it would sort anyway. So when I run that, I'll move this up. You can see the categories. It starts with the S, in this case, L, F, family, life, cooking, computer. Within computer, it's easy to see it in this one, I've sorted by title. And that was ascending, so database, e-business, handcrafted, HA and HO. Right there. So, and you can have multiple columns in your order by clause. You can order by things that aren't visible. So, for instance, I could take off the category out of my select statement and it would still sort by that. So when I run that, I'll still get the data is in the same order as it was before. I'm just not seeing the category column over here. So in the same way that you can have a where clause with columns that aren't visible in the select statement, you can do the same with your order by clause. And the next thing I'll show you in order by is that you can actually order by the columns by referring to the position. So in other words, this is position 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to order by 4, which would be category, and 1, which is title. So if I select that, it'll still run. This time I have the categories ascending because I didn't say descending. Right there, and then it's the title within that category. Once in a while you'll see me do this because I'm just typing a quick statement and I want to test it real quick. So I'll just put a 4 and a 1. Realistically, you probably shouldn't use column numbers because if anybody were to move your columns around in the select statement, all of a sudden your order by clause would be broken, right? You'd be ordered by sorting by things that you weren't anticipating, whereas by specifying your columns, I can still move them around in my select statement and the order by will still work the way I want it to. So order by is easy to use. Let's move on to talk about putting expressions in select statements. So I can do math inside of a select, or for that matter a where clause. And as an example, I'm again from the books table. I'm going to look at the title of the book, how much does it cost, what do we sell it for, and then I want to subtract those two, retail minus cost, to see what our profit is on each book. And so we'll also throw in the category here. So when I run that, I'll move this up. Here are my columns, cost, retail, and then if I subtract those two, there's my retail minus cost and the category. All right, now notice something interesting. What's the label on this column? It is the actual expression. And so, as you can imagine, these expressions are not limited to how, what level of math we go on here. We could do division and multiplication, and it could be a mile long. Well, I don't want that label to be at the top of the column. Let's give us another label, which leads me to this concept of aliasing our columns. So I can give a column a name that's more meaningful to me or to the user. And how I do that is by just typing the word as, and in quotes, put another word that I want to use for that column label. Okay, so that's called aliasing a column. So now when I run that same expression where I have the retail minus cost, but I'm going to call it profit, all of a sudden what I have here is profit. And you'll see as we get more sophisticated with our select statements, we'll do this a lot because we'll be using functions and string functions, date functions, things like that. We don't want to see all of that in the column title, so we will alias the column to represent what that data is representing. And as long as we're talking about aliases, I will mention a couple things right here, and that is you don't have to have the as keyword. Alright, so a lot of times if you're out Googling SQL scripts and you see one, you may just see retail minus cost and with a space, single quotes, profit. And it still works. I try to put in the as keyword because it just makes it more readily identifiable that that's an alias. And to even make it more confusing, if the alias doesn't have a space in it, so in other words, it's just one word, it's not two words, you don't even need the quotes and it'll still work. And then it even gets more confusing to read that because now it's like, profit really a column in the database or is that an alias? And so you recognize it's an alias because there's no comma here. If it was another column, I would have to have a comma. But part of writing good scripts and good code for that matter is making it readable for somebody else. Right? These scripts may last for months or years, and somebody long after you will be trying to read this, and you want to make it as legible as possible. So in general, I try to remember to put the as keyword, and then I always put the words in quotes or a single quote, even though it may not need it, with the idea, again, just to try to make it as legible as possible. Once in a while I get lazy and then I just don't feel like typing the as keyword, I'm in a hurry. But for the most part, I'll try and stick that in. Alright, enough about aliases. Let's get back to what we were talking about with our expressions or doing math inside of a select statement. What if the question was, show me all the books whose profit is greater than 10, right? So I want to limit the records I'm seeing. I don't want to see all of these. I only want to see those books where the profit is greater than 10. So right up here, I'll calculate it. Retail minus cost, I'll alias it as profit. But in my where clause, I have to redo that math. I'll have to say where retail minus cost is greater than 10. Okay, I cannot use an alias inside the where clause. Let me go ahead and run this just to verify that it works. There we go. Now we're seeing all the books where the profit's greater than 10. Now why won't this work? Right? When I run this, I'm going to get an error in my output table. Unknown profit in the where clause. So let me explain that a little bit. In my last video, I showed you what's in a typical SQL statement. At its most complicated, it's going to be a select from where, group by having, order by. Again, order by is always last. So far, we've learned select from and where. But these numbers on the left represent the order that the database will process that statement. So even though you and I read this and we actually type it in this order, when we hit execute and send it to the database management system, it's going to process it in the order that I show with these numbers. So in other words, the first thing the processor will do will grab the from statement and go, well, what tables are we looking at? Then it will grab your where clause and it will eliminate those records that don't meet the conditions we've specified. Finally, we haven't talked about group by or having, but those would happen next. And the second to the last statement is the select. Okay, now what columns do I want to display? So here's what happens. When I say where profit is greater than 10, it doesn't know what profit is because profit's defined in the select statement. And so the where clause, it's looking for a column called profit in this table, and that column doesn't exist, so we get an error. So as long as you recognize when you can use your aliases, obviously you define an alias in the select, but we can't use it in the where clause. Because order by is the very last statement, I can say order by profit and that will work, but that's about the only place an alias will work. You just cannot use an alias inside the where clause because it's the second statement to process when we execute a SQL statement. So, having said all that, now you should understand why I cannot use an alias right here. It's not going to understand it, and I'll have to take that expression, retail minus cost, and basically duplicate it in my where clause. One other thing I'll mention here, maybe I want to see, I'll go ahead and copy this statement. And I've mentioned this before, that things in the where clause do not have to be specified in the select statement. So I don't have to calculate that right there, and I can still show me all the books whose basically profit is greater than 10. This will run just fine. I'll see all the books, I'm just not seeing the actual profit calculation, but it'll still run just fine like that. Let's just do another example doing the same idea of these expressions. What if I wanted to just see what would happen if we increased the retail price of computer books by 10%? Alright, so I can take the title, cost, retail. Retail minus cost is profit, comma. So that's one column. And then I'm going to multiply retail times 1.1, which will generate a new retail price increasing by 10%. But I only want to do this where the category equals computer. Okay, so now I select that and hit run. There is the retail cost, and here's what it would be if I increased it by 10%. Now recognize a select statement is always about querying data out of the database. I am not changing any of the data in the database, right? This is just saying show me what this would look like, but it doesn't change the actual data in the database. Later in the quarter we'll talk about an update statement, or I want to update the prices of books and actually change the price in the database. Well, then we'll get into updates, but right now I'm just saying show me what it would look like, but I haven't made the change to the database. It's just visible to me, and as soon as I go onto a new screen, all of that information is gone. And I'll mention here, it is because we have the ability to do math in our select statements when I query data out of a database. You'll never store information in a database that you can calculate. The classic example is somebody's age, right? I'll store their birth date, but I won't store their age for two reasons. One, obviously the age changes every year, so then how would I remember to update the database? And the second is, if I want to know somebody's age, I'll calculate it. I'll take their birth date minus today's date and get their age. All right, very often you won't see, we'll see an example where we'll keep track of how many items somebody bought and the price of the items, but I don't necessarily have to store the order total. Because if I want the order total, I'll just calculate it on the fly. So I'm not trying to store a lot of additional information that I can just calculate when I need it. Let's take a look at an example where we actually do that. In the bookstore database, if you open the order items table, so I'll select the top 1,000 rows, here's what's in here. It's the order number, and then it's just an item number. So if they bought one item, they just get a 1. This guy bought 2, an item here and an item here, right? So 2 different books, basically. And then right here I'm seeing, well, how many of that book did they buy and how much did they pay for that book? So here's an example where on this order, 1002, a person bought 2 of this book, whatever that book is. So obviously they're going to spend $111 or thereabouts, right? Also you'll notice on 1003, that person bought 3 different books, right? Item 1, item 2, item 3. And here they are. They happen to have only bought 1 of each book. I think down here on order 1007, you can see they bought 4 books, and they happen to have bought 3 copies of that book. Later in the quarter, we'll talk about how to get the order total on 1007, right? That's why we get into these aggregate functions where we're going to sum across order num. But right now, I just want to get the line total, right? The fact that they bought 3 books times 72, what is that total? So let's go back to our example. So in this example, I'm going to be looking at the order items table. I'll be looking at the ISBN, the book ISBN, the quantity paid each, and then I'll multiply those two to get that line total. But I only want to see those orders, or the ISBNs, where the line total is over 100. So that's where in the where clause, again, I need to duplicate that expression to be able to say greater than 100. So now if I run that, there are the books, how much the person bought, and the amount they paid, and the line total. And notice I alias that right here, line underscore total. Now, let's talk about the order by clause again. I did mention you can order by and use the alias. And this is what's interesting. It's actually, it doesn't need to be in quotes. I can put line total here. And now I'm going to order these. It so happens that they already did. So, well, we'll do it descending. How about that? Just so we can see the effect of it. So now when I run that, I'll hit go. Oops, maybe not. Oops, it would help if I did order by right. So I put a space in order by. And now run that. There we go. So there it is in descending. And it actually was, I'm able to do it using the alias. Now, notice I did not put a space in my alias up here. Oh, and I forgot to put the as keywords. See, I told you, I mentioned that sometimes I get lazy and don't put that in. So if you put a space up here, it's problematic because I'll put a space in line total. Now I have to have quotes now. So I typically do anyway, but now I have to have them because I have a space. But what it does is it goofs me up on my order by, because now having a space down here, it doesn't recognize it. So when I run it, well, it won't even run. You can tell already I have a red X here. So as a general rule of thumb, I try never to put spaces in my alias column names, because if I try to use them other places, then that space ends up being problematic. Now you may think, well, why don't I put quotes around this? So I'll put it down here, I'll put quotes, I'll run it, boom, and it actually ran, but notice this is descending and this is ascending. So in other words, it's not taking it. It really didn't take that order by clause, even though it did run. Again, once in a while when I'm lazy, I'll just go 1, 2, 3, this is the 4th column. So I'll just say order by 4. Not a good habit. As I mentioned, if anybody changes the order that you put the columns are in your select statement, it'll goof up your order by clause, but it at least can run now, and now here I'm back to my descending line total. Okay, the last thing I'm going to cover on this video is the distinct keyword. Very easy to use, except students they don't pay attention to this line right here, which is very important. Distinct keyword will eliminate duplicate records or rows, right? They're the same thing, duplicate records. So in other words, if I want to see what are my distinct categories in books, when I just say select category from books, I'll get computer listed several times, children is listed several times, right? It's listing the category for every book in our database. I don't want to see that. I just want to see each category one time. So I just put in the keyword distinct. And now it will eliminate duplicate records. So whoops, let me select that, hit run. And now I'll move this up. I'm seeing each category just one time, not once for every book. So that's what distinct does. Let me do another example. Sure, so if I want to see all the states from the customers table, right? What are all the states, what states are our customers located in? So I hit run. Same thing, I'm going to see the states duplicated all over the place. I'm seeing each state for every customer. One more time, I put the word distinct in front of that. And now it'll eliminate that, and I'll just get a list of the states where people are from, but I don't have to see it duplicated all the time. So now let me demonstrate where distinct's not that helpful. Let's change this query, and I'm going to add the book title to the category from books. I'll go ahead and leave the distinct keyword there, and I'll hit run. Oh, recognize that the book titles are unique, right? I have no duplicate books in my book database. I'll let you know that. So what happens is I'm seeing my computer category 4 times again, right? Because distinct eliminates duplicate records. Well, the combination of title and category is unique because every title is unique. So distinct is doing nothing. I'll get the same number of records returned whether or not I put the word distinct in there, because as a record, each one of these is unique, and so there's no duplicates to eliminate. I'll have students try to put the distinct keyword in front of a particular column. Nope, you can only use it one time. I always put it in front, and it's going to eliminate a duplicate record. So it doesn't do you any good to try and say, oh, I only want the distinct category, but I also want to include the title. It's not going to work. Same thing with the state. If I all of a sudden wanted the customer's last name and their state, but I want to get the distinct, well, it would only eliminate somebody who happened to have the exact same last name and they were from the same state. If we had any customers like that, then it would get eliminated at that point. But notice I have a Smith from Florida, and down here I have a Smith from New Jersey, so I'm seeing both Smiths because they're from different states. I would get the same results if I deleted that or if I left it there. It's not really doing anything for me. If, I'll just go ahead and do that, I say, let me go ahead and put an order by clause so we get people put together, order by, and I'll go ahead and make it last name. I was about to type 1, so order by last name. So if you run down here, I do have 2 Smiths. So in that case, if I put distinct in front of this, it'll eliminate one of them. So now when I run down here, I'm going to go descending, so the Smith show up closer to the top. Now I only have 1 Smith, right? But guess what? If I put in their first name, because they're 2 different people, they have different first names, all of a sudden both Smiths show up again because they have different first names, and distinct is really not accomplishing anything. It would only eliminate a row if somebody happened to have the same last and first name in that case. I think I beat that to death, but just recognize that distinct only eliminates duplicate records. So the more columns you have, right, what you're basically after is that every column has to be the same in order for distinct to eliminate that record. So I think I covered everything I want to cover in this video. Order by clause, always the last clause of any select statement. So if I put a where clause, I have to do it before order by. You can add mathematical expressions. In this video, we only did very simple ones. We just subtracted 2 things or multiplied 2 things. There's no limit to how complicated that can get. Alias. As in single quotes, you can put another column name. Typically, I don't put spaces in my alias because when I refer to alias in the order by clause, I don't want to have spaces in whatever I'm defining or describing that column or the alias I'm using for that column. What else? And then just the distinct keyword. So none of it's very hard to use, but it does have a few gotchas associated with them.